Today on Nova Legends podcast, I have Fox Sports Chad Ricardo, who does an amazing job covering local sports for us with so much enthusiasm and charisma. I've been wanting to get Chad on for a while. Chad, thanks for doing this. Great to see you again.
Julian, it is an absolute honor to be here amongst greatness. A great opportunity to speak with you again. Our second time in the span of the last couple of months here. Again, I want to thank you for everything that yourself as well as your platform does for the youth and for the community here in the DMV. Thank you, brother.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, you're doing more of the heavy lifting, but I'm really pleased that you acknowledge that. It's an honor. Um,
Yes, sir.
so look, let me give a little bit of your background on what you're up to. You're an '06 graduate of James Madison University. I believe you played football there as well, Chad. Is that
I
correct?
did. I had a cup of tea out there on the football field, man. I was a bit of a tackling dummy, a practice all-star out there. I never played as well as I could talk the sport, Julian, but that kind of helped me to understand where I belonged. And there
Yeah,
was
and you
on
can't wear your nice suits on the football field either,
right.
man. Uh, but most of us know you, as I said, for your work on Fox. Also, the Ricardo Report
Yep.
YouTube channel where you lift up young athletes. You're a media consultant for the NFL's Accelerator program as well. You do play-by-play for Howard University. Also work for Monumental. They own the Capital One Center, so Capitals, Wizards, and stuff.
That's right.
Basically hustling, man. And you're again a freelance anchor at Fox. Chad, did I leave anything off there?
You know what? Husband and father as well,
Yeah.
Julian. As you know, oftentimes those are the most important jobs. So, without my wife, without my son, I don't know that I ever would have fully accomplished any of the things that I've ever been able to do or that I will do. So I definitely want to put that in as number one is husband and father as
Y-
well.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that first. So, well,
Yes,
look,
sir.
the whole world, or at least the whole country, has been talking about this Hayfield story. Just for
Sure.
folks who don't know what's going on, basically, Coach Darrell Overton, who led Freedom Woodbridge to the last two state championships and football championships in Virginia, moved to Hayfield this year. There were transfers that came in from Freedom and other schools, and then there was lots of reporting about whether or not these transfers were legitimate or not, or whether the team should be suspended for any reason. The VHSL initially cleared them, and the Fairfax County
Yeah.
initially seemed to clear them late in the game. They banned them from postseason. Hayfield went to federal court, got an injunction. At first, were ruled to be eligible for postseason, and then at the last minute, Hayfield withdrew from the
Sure.
playoffs. And the story again has been making national news. I wanted to ask you first of all, since you've been working at Fox and covering sports, is this the most challenging story you've ever had to cover
Oh,
because of all the politics involved?
man, what a great word to use off of the bat there, Julian. I think that challenging is an outstanding word to use for what has been the VA 6C region and this entire situation and this entire debacle. And Julian, I want to call it that, the VA 6C region, because I think that when we call it, as I've called it myself, the Hayfield situation, I think that we implicate to an extent in some regards, and even just calling it that, because I think that this story has been something which you may agree that has truly captivated, as you said, not only the nation, but that all of those parties in some way, shape, or form have been a part of this entire situation. In the 10 years that I've been covering high school sports here, especially when it was strictly under the Ricardo Report. Before I worked for Fox 5, or prior to that, working for NBC Sports Washington, I was in a position in which I could just capture the positive sides of high school athletics. I could just showcase student athletes. I could just say what little Tommy did well. I didn't have to say what Rashawn was doing negatively. I didn't have to say any of these things positive on the negative side of anyone. So this story, um, being tasked with the obligation, Julian, the obligation to tell a balanced story has been very challenging because in telling a balanced story, that was every step along the process going to upset someone, some community, some facet of people that I do personally care about beyond the business side of the things that I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, Chad, you've done a great job on the story. One of the problems I have, and I do some social media in this podcast as well. I don't necessarily love to get into race because you're going to alienate some
Sure.
people right away. I try to tell the story about sports, but race, is a factor in some of the things that we do in life. When you're covering a sports story like this, is it difficult to cover all the race issues that happen? Do you feel an obligation when you're covering for Fox News? And I forgot to give your NBC work it's due. Do you feel like it's necessary to keep the racial element out of it on the sports 10 minutes that you get or
Right.
5 minutes that you get, or do you feel like you have to tell that part of the story as well?
Man, it's another great question, Julian. It has been my goal um, throughout this process, when reporting, especially, to keep race out of it, at least to keep race away from the forefront of what it is that my story is that I'm telling. And I think that's important. And it's important that we key in on those words because the story here was never supposed to be about race, right? Like the story wasn't supposed to be about race. The story was supposed to be about transfers. It was supposed to be about potential recruiting violations. It was supposed to be about potential proselytizing and the relationships with the other Virginia 6C coaches and with FCPS and VHSL, etc. So race was not supposed to be a part of this story. I think, though, that the deeper that you got into this story, the more that you felt like race was a part of this story. And so I think that that brings us to a head of the more recent developments that came of this story. And this is not the more recent developments, is not something that I reported on. And there's reasons why myself and I believe that none of the other news stations reported on it. And of course, that is in relation to the audio that allegedly came from another coach in the region, in which that coach says that the head coach at Hayfield is akin to a child molester, which is just crazy words. Like that's crazy talk to say something like that about another man without having any ground to stand on with saying it. But to go even deeper, to say, when we start talking about race, to say that he is akin to a gang leader, Julian. And I think that anybody who comes from a community that is either a person of color themselves or that has been around people of color, when you say that a man is akin to a gang leader and that the kids that he leads likely come from broken homes and likely come from families in which the parents aren't available to be there for them because both of them are off working two jobs, are not able to be in the home with the children. When you start to say those things without having any background for why it is that you are making these assumptions about these kids, what is that if it's not about race? What is that if it's not about race? So for a coach to allegedly, and we want to be clear here, to allegedly make these comments and for the words to flow so fluidly out of his mouth, that's number one. For them to flow so poetically out of his mouth when he says it, Julian. And for the second thing, for him to never at any point stop and say to himself, wait a second, I've got parents on this call right now that are people of color in their own regard that this could offend.
Yeah.
When those dots are not connected and you don't even realize it, what are we talking about if there's not a racial underbelly to this entire conversation?
Yeah, Chad, I didn't know how to handle that. So I got a copy of the audio. Again, it hasn't been verified by an expert, so not able to say exactly who it is, even though the person
And, and,
seems to
and
describe.
and briefly, just briefly to that point, and again, one of the reasons why it has not and likely will not be reported on, that is something that is a the assumption is that that was recorded without the permission of the parties that was being spoken about it. So it's not something we can't bring that in and broadcast it because that breaks laws in Virginia. So that's very important that that's why that hasn't been put out by the news stations in and of itself. I think the stations are aware of it, but
Yeah,
that's one of the reasons why that's not out on television.
exactly. And I think as long as we don't identify who the
No,
person is,
100%.
I think
100%.
it was interesting. So I was, the audio had gotten around, and a buddy of mine wanted to listen to the audio, but I wasn't able to message it because it was too big. So
Mhm.
I put it on YouTube without making it public. Just and I sent it, I sent it to this buddy of mine, and it was after lunch. I took a little nap,
Sure.
and I woke up 20 minutes later, and there was 1,400 views.
Wow. Yeah, man.
And I was just like, my goodness, what happened. So I think all of us, were struggling with what to do with it. It was shocking. It's probably maybe one of the biggest stories of this whole affair,
That's
but
right.
it's largely been forgotten. But I did want to ask you this. Now, I'm not sure if you know this, but a few years ago, me and Daryl Overton, Coach Overton, had kind of a public spat, and
Okay.
we were is whether or not they needed to score that many points. That was after they scored
Okay.
100 points against somebody.
Okay.
So Coach and I were going at it on social media, and then I actually interviewed him, and yeah, he just had a great time. And I was just so impressed of the way he talked about, how he coaches the kids, developing the kids, his viewpoints of the game and development. I was blown away.
Sure.
And I've interviewed him a few times, and I really like Coach Overton. I really like him a lot. When you're covering stories like that, when you get to know people, is it tough to cover stories when you know people and you like them? I'm not necessarily putting words in your mouth,
No,
but
no,
can
no.
that be difficult for you when you're trying to cover these stories and you actually know the people and actually like them a lot?
I think that it can be. And I mean, I kind of I want to double down on the piece that we were speaking to a moment ago as well. The first time that I reported on this. It was when the allegations initially came out by the mother, whose name I won't mention as well here. I interviewed that mother. Soon she made allegations. I interviewed her, put her on television before anybody else did. Then went over to Hayfield and interviewed parents, not parents of anyone that was in the process of transferring in, but of parents who had been at Hayfield, because those were the parents that I wanted to be able to speak with. And what initially blew me away is that, again, telling this balanced story, because that's what we do at Fox 5. And in telling this balanced story, I began to see the comments that were coming up that were saying, oh, there he is taking up for his boy. And I'm like, man, Dio is my boy. When the truth of the matter is that I've known Coach Overton for far less time than I've known Coach Doc, for far less time than I've known Panoni. I have covered probably 7 times more games at Lake Braddock than I ever have at Freedom and/or Hayfield. Last year was actually the first time that I had ever spoken to Coach Overton. I had no relationship with him at all. So when people were starting to comment, well, there he is taking up for his boy, my question was, well, how does that, where do you make the connection exactly that that's my boy. And how often do you use your boy in your life anyway? But but how do you make that connection? But so to answer you, yes, that is one of the things that has made this entire story challenging for me because I care deeply about the community at now Hayfield. I care deeply about the community that's at Lake Braddock, deeply about South County, got deep relationships at Fairfax and at a few of these other schools as well, at Freedom prior to that. So when these parents, I do my best to tell my report, allow for it to be balanced, and then let all of the comments do whatever it is that they do. But to see these parents having so much vitriol towards each other has done badly for my soul because I don't want to see that. I love it more so when we can all come together and celebrate our student athletes and celebrate community as one.
Yeah. So it's beautiful. I get in trouble because I like Coach Overton.
Mhm.
Unlike you, I'm not a journalist, so
Right.
I can say that I like him and I'm biased.
Right.
And when people want me to jump in and criticize and pile on, I
Mhm.
won't do it. And plus, I'm an attorney by trade,
That's
so
right.
my first instinct is always you got to prove
That's right.
these things.
Well,
You can't
come
make
on.
all these allegations,
Come on.
which all along was what was my problem. Let me also ask you this. One of the things, usually you're covering sports on an island.
Yes.
Washington Post does a pretty good job of covering the DC area, DMV area, and there's social media that covers it as well. But usually, you pretty much have the free reign amongst the networks to cover it. Others come into playoff time, but Chad Ricardo definitely is the kind of the man on the scene.
Sure.
But all of a sudden, this was this Fairfax County Times. I had never heard of them before this.
Sure.
And they all of a sudden started reporting this issue with such enthusiasm. Never in my life has the transfers been so important. But they covered this with so much. Did the fact that they were covering this, I don't want to say rattle you, but did it kind of unsettle you in that you're trying to report as you always report and
Yeah.
cover things with the tempo you would like to cover things. So when the
Mhm.
news is important, you'll cover it. But if you have another news source that
Sure.
people don't really know of, but they are putting stuff out there, does that change the tempo at which you would normally want to report on a story?
The tempo was certainly heightened, and has been heightened. I think that that platform, I believe that they did, whether I agree or disagree or or confirm or deny any of their reporting for the basis of this question here, that's not important. What they did though is they initially took the stance of being the voice of at least a certain sect of Fairfax County. And
Mhm.
I think that had they not initially, again, whether they were right or not, right or wrong, whether they were right or wrong, they initially shed light on a situation that did what it should have done, which was at least have this be looked into. They at least made it so that this could be looked into. Now, at the end of the day, FCPS, in accordance with the VHSL, cleared Hayfield of and again, words matter here. So they cleared Hayfield and allowed for them to continue on with their season in spite of any of the reporting that platform made. But I do think that initially they shed light on something. They look, we all of us received emails from the same mother that was telling us about 34 transfers from Freedom coming into Hayfield, which was never true. It was never true. You look back at last year's Freedom program, they had a little over 50 total kids in their program total. That's not even counting the seniors that graduated and went on to play school. So for those of us that were in the know, there was never 34 students who came from Freedom into Hayfield and were playing on. That was never the case. But Fairfax County, they got their information, they put it out, and that brought attention to this, which ultimately gave voice to members of the community. And for giving voice, I can't knock them for giving a voice to some individuals that wanted for that to be told.
Yeah, well, that's fair, and I don't think we want to criticize other media too strongly. One of the reporters, I think the head of that group joined my Facebook group the other day. I invited her on the podcast, and I
What
was
did she say?
she hasn't responded, so I'll
I,
see whether
I,
I'll see
I,
what.
I, I would like to be interested. I hope that you get that interview with her. I would like to interview her from right here in my home studio, not at my main platform, but from right here at my home studio. You mentioned pace. I do want to say this. You mentioned pace, and it did feel as though, and this is not an allegation on my behalf, but it did feel as though, as a consumer, it felt as though once so much traffic started being picked up that there could have been a situation in which you're a content producer in which you desired to continue to produce content because now all of a sudden you're getting clicks and you're getting eyes and you're getting more views on the content that you're putting out. Not at all an allegation, but from the outside, that's what it felt like could have been the case.
Yeah, for sure. Chad, last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, Channel 7, Local 7 came out with a report, and I thought it was way over the top. And it was interesting because they really hadn't reported on the story all along. And they came in with the allegation. They basically said all these blowouts, the games are law. And I think they got the story all wrong. They got the flavor of the story all wrong, which was frustrating to me. Did you hear that story? And did you have any comment on that as well?
I did not read that story. So I cannot comment on that because
Right.
I
Okay.
didn't read it, but I
Yeah.
may go check it out.
Yeah.
I may go check it out after this. What I will say to that, again, having not read it, I do have respect. I am friends and colleagues with the two sports reporters at Seven. I don't know whether their sports team handled it or whether some of their news people handled it. But just in regard to this story, I think that if you entered this story halfway or three-quarters of the way through, if you stepped into it at that point, and so now all that you hear is the backlash from one side. And so you walk into this story hearing, oh my gosh, there's 31 transfers there. Oh my gosh, this coach did that. Oh my gosh, this happened. It was banned. All of these people are upset. I think that as much as, again, it is our task to walk in and to be balanced. I think that it's hard to do that because there's been so much noise around this that if you weren't there at the beginning of it, that it's hard to know what's noise and what's facts of the
Mhm.
matter because so much has been reported that wasn't necessarily facts.
Yeah. Well, Chad, did you hear from like your bosses or producers at Fox and say, "Hey, we want more of this"? Did anyone talk to you about the story and say, "Look, this is hot. We want you to talk more about this story"?
I think that without delving too deep,
Yeah.
I knew that this was going to be this during the summertime.
Mhm.
Because again, you have to look at all of the different factors that were at play. Number one, it's football. And football is, football not only here in the DMV, but across this great country of ours. Football is such a driving force of ratings, of popularity, of public attention, of community. So it's football. It is a championship winning coach leaving one school and coming into a different region. It is Northern Virginia with a people and a community that are very tight knit. And then, Julian, and then you go back to where we started here. You take all of those other elements and you add in the fact that the head coach happens to be black and that these kids that are coming in that they happen to be black as well, and then you have to ask yourself what might end up happening next.
Mhm.
So this is something that I was actually alerting our producers to be on the lookout for, that there was a chance that this might really blow up. And again, I don't know anyone who was not deeply rooted in high school sports. I don't know that they could have seen what this was going to turn into, but I think that individuals such as yourself and myself, that we saw this coming a far ways.
Yeah, I think you're more popular now than in the DC sports scene than ever, Chad. You've done a great job on this.
Thank you.
Speaking of which, do you have any regrets on how you covered it, or the things that you could have done better? I have some regrets on this story, even though again, I'm not officially a media figure like you are,
Sure, sure, sure.
but it was such a long road, and I tried to be a voice of reason, and
Mhm.
even though I am conflicted. I try to get everybody their voice. I tried to be a voice of moderation in this situation, but I think there's probably things I could have done a little bit better. How about you?
Right.
When you look back on it, there's things you wish you would have done better.
I tell you what, you ask great questions, Julian. I
Thanks.
wasn't expecting these. You know, you sit down for podcasts, you get softball questions. These are very good. First of all, I think that you're selling yourself short by saying that you're not a member of the media. I mean, in today's day and times where new media is just as powerful as legacy media. I mean, you do this interview, you put it out there on Facebook, a lot more people will see this than sometimes we'll see broadcast news. So you are
Thank
very
you.
much a member of the media and an important voice in the community. In terms of regrets, again, it has been my goal to always tell balanced stories. There are a couple of things. I think that initially, with every real update that came out and we told this story, it was challenging initially to get parents who, I don't want to say anti-Hayfield, but parents who represented the other side of the street. It was challenging to get those parents to comment on air. So therefore, I may tell a story in which I tell the story. Hayfield has been is there's allegations. Hayfield has been cleared of allegations. Hayfield has been banned. Hayfield has been put back in the mix. So when you tell those stories again, I want to bring in sound, get interviews with people from both sides of the aisle. But initially, those from the other side of the aisle were not so willing to come on camera to talk. So I think that that's why there are individuals within that represent that portion of the community that said, well, Chad's just telling this from Hayfield's side, when in actuality, I talked to parents every time, they just weren't willing to come on camera. So that's certainly not a regret of mine. I just would have liked for that to have been the case. Um, I, I I would have loved it though, Julian, had we never even gotten to this point. You know, I would have been happy if there was a decision made back in August. And forgive me, I'm not good with months, so I don't even know
I
what
think it's
month.
August. I think it's August.
Okay, there we go. I would have been happy had there been a decision made in August, and then we could have reported on it in August, and then we could have gone on with this football season, and we could have celebrated student athletes and celebrated their accomplishments and told the stories of student athletes who have overcome things, and not to have clogged up the stratosphere of high school sports in Northern Virginia and beyond with more so he said, she said, and the degradation of our community as opposed to the uplifting of our community.
Yeah, the story could have been much more simple. Do the residencies check out? Is
There
there
we
any
go.
proof of them being recruited? If no, let's play the game.
Let's play ball. Yeah,
let's
let's
play.
play ball.
So,
Yeah.
the last question directly on this. Um, I think the result, though painful for many of the players, the fact that Hayfield withdrew was probably the best result we could possibly have, because I don't know how else it would have ended.
Yeah.
And I don't think with the courts involved, the
Mhm.
VHSL declawed with any power. By Hayfield doing this, I thought it was a very brave thing for them to do. I'm not saying that anything was that Hayfield committed any violations of any rules, but I think Hayfield did the right thing. And I felt like as soon as they did that, people attack them.
That's right.
Oh, they withdrew.
I
Someone,
told you
I
so.
told you, someone's got to be fired. They got to
Right.
fire the principal. They got to fire the superintendent. So I'm like, they did what I consider the right thing. I'm not saying they were
Sure.
wrong, and people still attack them. And I was
That's
just
right.
like,
That's right.
so what do you think about how it was resolved? Was it a proper resolution?
I think that it was. I think that again, based off of everything else, and what this entire VA6C ordeal has been, once those text messages came out, and those text messages, which we do believe to be accurate, but we can still call them alleged, those text messages that allegedly came from the former athletic director at Hayfield, once those came out, I think that it was difficult to turn another page from that. It was difficult to turn a blind eye to that from any sides. So I want to give the Hayfield principal, Principal Thompson, I believe, credit in that regard of saying, you know what, even if there's an idea that this was brought over under this guise, even if there's an idea of that, we have to shut it down now. I respected that. I hated that for the kids. I hate that. All of this. I hate it for all of the kids. I hate it for all of the kids, but I hated that for the kids. But I thought that that was an adult making an adult decision in that moment. And like you said, I think it was the best way because like Julian, let's say that doesn't happen, bro. Let's say that doesn't happen. Let's say that they go back to court. I think that it was the fourth that they were supposed to go back to court. Let's say if they cleared again. Chances are on the football field they run through Fairfax, run through Braddock. Chances are, no disrespect to those programs, but the chances are they run through those schools. Chances are they knock off Madison, and now they're about to be in the state championship. But we would have seen the entire Fairfax community just in crumbles at that point. Like this would be at such a fever pitch right now that I don't even know that it would have been safe for the community where we would have been had that happened. And there's so much of me that doesn't like if indeed Hayfield did not do anything quote unquote wrong and they're not proven to have done anything wrong. I hate that we have to celebrate that they bowed out for the betterment of the community if they didn't do anything wrong. But that's where we are.
Yeah, I don't think anything was ever proven. I think they did a very brave, and I think you can argue the right thing. And I just hated the fact that people went on the attack after they chose to do that. It was very painful to watch. Now, Chad, you mentioned earlier you called me new media, but you're new media too. You're a
You damn
combination
right
of
I
old
am.
media.
You are damn right I am. Yes.
You are. So, 30 years ago, or even
Yep.
25 years ago, you would have taken your job on Fox News and you freelance, in NBC as well, others. You would have tried to move up, you would have moved up, you would have been, probably a regional broadcast, a national broadcast. The arc was pretty clear of how to move up in the broadcast world. But now with social media and other types of media, it's unclear
Yep.
the path.
Yeah.
When you look at the options that are available to you, are you sometimes confused about where your best opportunities are, or do you embrace the fact that you can do different things and you can see what ends up being the best path for you?
Yep. And Julian, hopefully I'm going to condense my answer to the best of my ability. You got to forgive me.
Take your
I
time. Take your
talk
time.
for a living, so and
Yeah.
look, first of all, we gotta be clear. I work for Fox 5.
Oh,
You're gonna have a whole nother level of individuals sending me DMs with the Fox News piece.
I
Shout
call,
out
okay.
News.
Gotcha.
We are an owned and operated organization, so we are on the same
Gotcha.
team as Fox News.
Gotcha.
But I
Gotcha,
work for
sir.
Fox 5 DC.
Yeah.
So I without being too long-winded,
No, take your time.
I
We're- we're-
started I studied media at James Madison University. Graduated, Julian. I went back to school for grad school in this crazy way, bro. I was walking through the mall one day, and there was a Who Wants to Be a DJ competition for the local radio station. And I just had nothing else to do, so I entered and I ended up winning. And so I earned an on-air spot on the radio. And this was when Kanye West's his College Dropout album came out. I was a huge Kanye West fan, so I'm like, bro, I now, yes, I studied media, but I've got my first job now in the media. What am I in grad school for? Julian, I dropped out of grad school, started working at the radio station, and that was the start of my career. So I put all of my media, my traditional television broadcast media thoughts on hold. Started in radio, then I started hosting live events. I moved briefly to Tampa, Florida, moved back here to Northern Virginia. I didn't know anything about Northern Virginia at that time. I had never lived here before, and I answered a Craigslist ad. And for all of the young people out there, Craigslist used to be a reputable place where you could find true gigs to make money. I knew I wanted to be on TV, but I just wanted to make more money. So I answered an ad that told me that I could make $1,000 a night hosting parties. And I was like, that sounds like something you should sign me up for. I was 26 years old, Julian, getting paid to party. I was like, absolutely. That ended up being my initiation into the bar and bat mitzvah world. This was 16 years ago. I signed a contract on the spot. I've been hosting bar and bat mitzvahs for the last 16 years. What that did, as I bring this full circle, is I had a 9 to 5 job at that point in time. I was working with the school system. I had a 9 to 5 job, but the money that I was making on Saturdays alone allowed for me to retire from my 9 to 5 job, which opened the doors for me once I hit 30 years old. I said, bro, if you don't get back into pursuing this sports television career now, you'll never be able to get there. I applied to every television station, every opening in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And I'm not talking about on air spots. I applied to every job that I could see in these, and no one called me back. So I said, if no one will hire me, I will start my own thing. So that was the birth of the Ricardo Report. And because I was making all of my money on Saturdays, that allowed for me to work for free and to build my brand Monday through Friday and Saturday afternoon, doing my own thing. It was through that I became, in some regard, the voice of youth and high school sports in the area. And I knew that if I could own that market, because high school sports truly doesn't get the love in this region that it deserves for all of the talented student athletes we had. So I knew that if I could own that market, that it could one day open a door for me to one of these major stations. And somewhere along the lines, it did open up that door. I don't know that I want to share that part, but an important individual, I ended up covering their son without, and it was totally unbeknownst to me that their son played on this team that I was covering. But lo and behold, I did a story on an important individual's son, which truly opened a direct path for me, and the rest has been history from there. So new media, I started in new media before new media was ever a thing. Now that I've made it to here and to finally answer what it is that you asked me, Julian. So now, where we are right here in 2024, 2025, it's the best point in time, because if you look at the Stephen A. Smiths, you look at the Shannon Sharps, you look at all of these other individuals, these are individuals who are saying, I can't just work at this station. I have to also have my own new media podcast branch as well, in order to feed directly to the community the words that I want to say without being necessarily filtered and or taken back. So I think that nowadays the goal is, at least for me, is to do it all, because doing it all is the way to continue to climb this ladder. Now, legacy TV, unfortunately, is beginning to drop off in terms of ratings a little bit. That's why at Fox 5 we have streaming platforms where you can watch content all day long. They give me a lot of freedom over there, and I truly, truly appreciate that. So yes, the idea now is to do it all.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. Guys like Bill Maher, The
Yeah,
Real
man.
Time, Shannon Sharp, Stephen Smith. Uh, there's so many politicals like William Crystal.
Mhm.
Over and over, they all make millions and millions of dollars
Right.
with their network contracts or their television contracts, and they all have their own YouTube channel now. And it's
That's right.
amazing they're all doing both. And
Yeah.
it's interesting to watch. This is when I started this kind of just as a hobby during the lockdown is something to do. And it's one of those things. What why not keep it up? Because everyone else is doing it, so why not do it? Chad. One thing that we've gotten away from. I first noticed you last year. You would come on dressed up, always to the nines, colorful suits, and you would give your top five of the week. Boom, bam. And
Bam.
I felt like this year because of the Hayfield saga, you've gotten away from that a little bit. I didn't see a lot of your top fives and stuff.
That's right.
I feel like the Hayfield story kind of overwhelmed everything. Did I read that right?
No, no, that wasn't it. Although, listen, to the point that we're making here,
Yeah.
last year I had a show that aired live on Sunday nights.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
because that show aired live
Yeah.
on Fox 5 Sunday nights, I was able to bring that. I have a
Uh,
show that's on in the morning on Fox Local now that is more so podcast style. So I just don't have the same show. I look, those top fives, I thought that they were, not patting myself on the back at all, but I thought that they were great. I
they're
thought
great.
that they
Yeah, they're
got
great. Yeah.
community engagement,
Yeah.
brother. I thought,
Yeah.
I mean, I could, pull the strings of this community and that community and bring everyone together with it. That was a true joy. And so hopefully down the line we'll bring that back. But that had nothing to do with Hayfield. That was just programming. That was
Yeah,
programming.
I
That
mean,
took
you don't
that.
need my advice, but
Yeah.
that was one of those things where I noticed you. I mean, you were
Yeah.
that you got people's attention, and people every week were like, and one week you would bring freedom down, you would bring them up. Everyone was waiting on what you're going to do
Pulling
every
the
week.
strings, Julian,
You
pulling the
were,
strings.
you
Yeah,
were.
man.
So you should
Yeah,
definitely don't give that
yeah,
your Chad top five. That was a very powerful thing. So
Thank you, brother.
Chad, when you think about the future
Yeah,
of what you want to do, and it sounds like to me you're gonna continue to pursue old media type opportunities, network opportunities, ESPN, whatever comes your way, and new. What are some of the other things you would like to accomplish in your media career?
man. Um, I, I want. I, let me say this first, and then I'll get there. For any young person out there that's listening, any middle-aged person that's out here listening, I think that, you know, finding the right opportunity is more important than finding the highest paid opportunity or the this, that, the other. Because when you find the right opportunity, when you find the opportunity that fits, it truly opens up the doors for you to be able to do so much. And I'm fortunate enough to have found what I believe to be right now the right opportunity at Fox 5, because I'm not only allowed to do sports, I'm allowed to do our other shows. I'm allowed to do our cooking show. I'm allowed to do our show that comes on at 7:30, in which we, do some light debate. We got a new show that's coming out that I do. Fox Local, which again is our streaming platform, which is available nationally, which is not me plugging it, but I'm telling you about this because it's so cool. One of the things that we've been doing are our Commanders pregame tailgate specials, which include me walking around Northwest Stadium, and we've been to Philadelphia and Jersey as well, and interviewing and talking to the people in the crowds for 2 hours before the game, all alone, all by myself and my cameraman. We're doing this, but what those things have done, we've excelled at them because that has allowed for me to combine all of my skill sets into one. So now I'm not just talking about sports, I'm actually connecting with the people, and I'm using some of the skill set that I've learned in my live hosting days and bringing that to the table and to this platform, and it's being seen nationwide. It is an opportunity for me to show off all of my skill sets, and that is with Fox 5 and Fox Local and Fox Corporate that has provided me those opportunities. So now, if you ask me where it is that I desire to go, my desire, Julian, and I don't say this with any ego, I say it with confidence, and I say it because I believe it. My goal is to look at Stephen A. Smith, look at The Rock, look at Kevin Hart, and say that if you can combine those three individuals and make one career out of that, that's where it is that my career will ultimately go. Stephen A. Smith, The Rock, Kevin Hart, combine them and split out the love child of those three. That is where my career is ultimately going to go. And again, I give credit to the individuals that I'm working with now to lend me the platforms to truly be able to present myself in my most natural and authentic ways.
Yeah, absolutely. In the sky is the limit. So Chad, as you know, Madison is playing Oscar Smith this weekend. And what is it about 757 people? You guys think you're so good. You carry such an attitude with you about
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
football and all sports. What is it? Talk a little bit about growing up in the 757. What is it about sports in the 757 that's so important to your culture down there?
Yeah, that's right. I am a 757 boy. Hampton, Virginia, went to the same high school as Allen Iverson.
Is that right? Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, Bethel High School. Played against Michael Vick when he was Vick is a year and a half older than me, but played against Michael Vick. But I'll tell you this before I get to the story or to the answer of your story. Michael Vick, although he went on to revolutionize the game of football, Michael Vick wasn't the story in Hampton Roads at the point in time in which he was there. Is another quarterback by the name of Ronald Curry.
Oh yeah.
Ronald Curry, for all of our historians out there, Google Ronald Curry because he was that dude. He's the quarterback at Hampton High School. Ronald Curry was the Gatorade National Player of the Year in both basketball and football. I think that he won a state championship with the Hampton Crabbers every year that he was there, and had that been arguably the most dominant public school program in all of the nation of the Hampton Crabbers. He ended up going on to UNC and had a couple of head coaches towards ACL, ended up not playing quarterback, had a sandwich in the NFL with the Oakland Raiders at wide receiver, because that was before they allowed quarterbacks to do what they're doing now. So they
Yeah.
said, Ron Curry, you're too athletic. Go play wide receiver.
I
But
think he's still coaching in the NFL today.
is
Yeah.
he?
Yeah, I
There we
think
go.
so. Yeah.
Like one day, Julian, you can help me on this, bro. I'm gonna put together and all of the 757 greats. We're gonna come together and we're gonna do something for that community, hold a panel, a media panel, etc. Because so many talented athletes come from there. I wasn't one of them, but so many super talented athletes come from there. What makes it that way? There's a hunger. I had never experienced in my life what it's like to live in the DMV, being down there. In the 757, I think that, 95% of the population is middle class or below, and very below. Like there are a few individuals in the 757 that reach those levels of success. So the hunger that we have down there is a real thing. Man, I could tie this back into the situation that has been going on in the 6C here, but I'll refrain from it at least right now. Like when you talk about individuals who are actually playing these games as a means to get out, as a means to survive, as a means to change the family situation for both their generation and generations to come. That's what it means to come from the 757 and to play ball down there. And so these student athletes have a level of desire and hunger that is different than most of the student athletes that are in Northern Virginia. And oftentimes in these championship games, you see that manifest itself out there on the football field.
Yeah. Well, Chad, if you ever want to watch a great football or basketball game from the peninsula down there, you can find it on YouTube. They do a very
Mhm.
good job covering high school sports there. I guess Virginia Pilot, I believe, is the name of
That's right. That's right.
I could probably name some of the reporters down there. They do a great job reporting on high school sports. Did you first decide you wanted to get into media when you were growing up down in the peninsula?
I knew when I was 8 years old that this was the only thing that I wanted to do with my life. There were two things growing up, the only two things that I knew that I'd be happy with. When I was a young child, I wanted to be Martin Luther King. Um, I did. I wanted to be Martin Luther King. I didn't even really understand what that meant at the time. I do now, but I wanted to be Martin Luther King. And then when I got to be about 9 years old, I started watching Sports Center. And I decided then at 9 years old and watching Sports Center that I was going to be a broadcast journalist, and it was that, or there would be nothing else. The Martin Luther King point is that I have always cared so deeply about community. I've always cared so deeply about bringing people together. I've always cared so deeply about being a voice for my people. And so now again, I'm in such a happy space in life because I'm able to do both of those things, my two life goals at one time. That is cover sports on television and uplift the community and bring people together at the same time. And so that makes me very happy and thankful.
Yeah. Well, you talk about the blue collar nature of the 757. Was it an adjustment for you when you went to Harrisonburg and James Madison? A lot of wealthy kids at that school, much more diverse, lot more white kids
Yeah.
there than you probably went to school with at Bethel. Was that an adjustment for you to go to Harrisonburg?
So I went to Ferrum College first. I'll tell you, right? I had I had a full scholarship to North Carolina A&T,
Mm,
and I had a full scholarship to Howard. My parents, again, this is 1999 at the time, so that we're not far removed from DC being the murder capital of the world at that point. My parents, who hadn't traveled very much, they said, "Chad, you can't go to Howard. I'm sorry, you're not going to
mm,
Washington DC. That's
mm,
off of the table." We took a trip down to North Carolina A&T, and it was on a gloomy day, Julian. It was gloomy. The weather wasn't great. I was with my parents, so I just didn't have a good time. And I didn't understand. My older sister, was the first one in our family to go to college. She went to Tech. And she had a great time at Tech. So in my couple of hours at A&T, I didn't have a good time. So I was like, I just don't want to go here. So I ended up deciding that I did not want a red shirt playing football. I wanted to go somewhere where I could play right away. So I went to Division III Ferrum College first,
mm.
and it was a culture shock because as small as Harrisonburg is, Ferrum, Virginia was 10 times smaller. Nothing but farmland, nothing but cows, nothing but, any of the things like that. And there was a total of about, outside of the football team, I think there were 7 blacks on the entire campus. Um, I've always been able to I've always been able to move in and out of different social circles. So although it was a shock to the eyes, it wasn't difficult for me to be able to navigate those spaces there. So when I got to JMU was like heaven, brother.
Heaven.
I'm not gonna lie to you. JMU was heaven by the time I got to JMU. So it was tremendous. And just like any other PWC, I think that the blacks still congregated in small groups. That was our home. And then we spread out and branched out to the other groups when we needed to. And I played football, so you had your football family there as well.
Yeah. So I played high school basketball with one of Ferrum's greatest, Chris Warren, and I were on the same, yeah, we're on the same team at Robinson, and great guy, amazing athlete, still in contact to this day. Great guy. He's up here in Northern Virginia. My daughter is at JMU. She's a sophomore,
Go
And
Duke,
yeah, and well, she's partying a lot down there. And I said, Lily, you got to really be about the books. She said, Dad, you sent me here.
bro.
Yeah. So I didn't realize that Madison was such a good time, but
Julian,
yeah.
it is the happiest place on earth.
Yeah.
It is the happiest place. Listen, I tell you what, in all honesty, and this is your sophomore daughter here, so I don't, I don't want to make you sweat it all right here, but there is a good amount of partying at JMU, but the people treat each other the right way there. The
Mhm.
people treat it, I remember being in school and one of my homeboys, my best friend at that point, went to UVA, which I know, that you know a lot about. And at UVA during those years, the race relations weren't great. There were blacks over here and whites over there. They had more blacks at UVA than we had at JMU, but it was a sense of segregation from our point of view at UVA at that point in time. My sister went to Virginia Tech, and my niece, who's near my age, ended up going to Tech as well. And there again seemed to be this sense of segregation at that school also. At JMU, at least when I was there, you didn't feel that. Like I've never been in a space that had so much love and acceptance all around. And again, I sound like a commercial, first Fox Local, now JMU, but there was never a space that felt like so much love and inclusion as there was at James Madison University. And that's why I loved it there.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to going down Saturday. Are you going down Saturday for the Madison game?
I have not been.
Oh,
No, 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 no. I'm not. So Saturday nights I work, bro.
okay.
Mitzvahs, Julian.
Oh,
I
gotcha.
want to make my money.
Yeah. Bar
Yeah,
mitzvahs are
yeah,
they're a good time. So,
yeah.
well, look, Chad, I wanted to end, and I appreciate all your time. This has been great. Glad that we finally did this. Um, there was a time when, and I mentioned the Virginia Pilot in the Tidewater, but there was a time that we covered high school sports very well up here. We had the Fairfax
Wow.
Journal, even the Washington Post had a little bit more resources, even though the guys that they have do a great job now. Um, but I mean, and I mentioned to you offline that you've done a really good job bringing some energy back to the high school sports. What do you think the future is in
Mm.
covering high school sports? Do you think we'll continue to have like Facebook groups and we'll take to have local podcasts? Obviously, Fox Sports, I didn't say Fox News, Fox Sports
There we
and
go.
local, they're going to do what they can, but
Yes.
you can only cover so many teams. If you're
Yeah,
in
yeah.
DC, you can't cover 100 teams in the area. You could cover the top 10 the
That's
best you
right.
can, but you can't be everywhere.
No.
What is the future of covering high school sports?
Here's the challenge, right? And this is not even something I didn't understand this again for the years that I was knocking on the door and I couldn't get in. I didn't understand why the stations weren't covering more high school sports. But here's the challenge. The challenge is that this region is so massive. Like we look at it and we say, "Oh, it's the DMV." Oh, it's one thing. It's the DMV. But it's not. There are so many people in this conglomerate and in this space. So what ends up happening is that if I do a story that's strictly on sports, it's strictly on sports about Quince Orchard in Maryland 4A school, and it's just about sports. The people in Prince George's County don't care. The people in Washington, D.C. don't care. Not in Fairfax County, not in Loudoun County. No of those other places care because their team doesn't play that team. So on my news broadcast, I'm not actually touching all of the legs of our audience. So, and the same for any other of the other schools anywhere else. Again, this Hayfield story carried so much weight because it's bigger than sports. This is not a sports story. It's a community-based story that other people who don't live here can look at it and say, this could happen. Whatever you want
Yeah.
to say could happen, this could happen down the street from me as well. So I need to pay attention to this. So the fact that this space is so large, it makes it challenging to cover sports just as them being sports. That's why anytime that I do a story, or a lot of the times that I do a sports story when it's not Friday Night Lights, it is something involving the community around athletes at that school. So again, it has to appeal to a broader audience than just the people that are at that school. So I think that that's unfortunate. I think that a couple of the other stations, some of the smaller stations who employ three, four, five sports reporters, that they cover sports exclusively. But it's hard to do because this area is so large. So that's why individuals such as yourself, individuals, let's give somebody else credit. The Mamba, that's a social media account that covers Maryland sports, a great statistician on Twitter, puts out information. That's why individuals such as he are important. And my guy, man, I could go through this laundry list. Forgive me to everybody else, but all of the individuals who shine light on these high school student athletes, it is important and imperative that we continue to do so, and that I continue to find lanes to do that, even if it's not in legacy media with Fox 5, but on my own, because the larger stations likely won't do it to the credit that they need to have it.
Yeah, it's a great point. I've gotten outreach from folks wanting me to do like statewide groups that we do for
Mm-hmm.
Virginia or other states. And I tell them that it's hard to build community
That's
around a
right.
too big area. It
Too
says you got to
big.
keep the target kind of small
That's
because then
right.
you really build community. And I think,
Yes.
we've been able to do, Fairfax, Alexandria, Arlington, and maybe Loudon. Prince William has their own thing going, but
Yeah.
you have to keep it small enough where there's community. And
That's right.
when it gets too big, as you eloquently said, people lose interest. Well, Chad, look, this has been great. I hope you come back with the top five
I
next fall.
Yes.
We were counting on that. If you need my help, maybe we can work on that one together. But that was a really interesting. It was a really exciting thing that we look forward to every week. But look, in the meantime, I really appreciate you doing this. This has been great. Thanks for all you do. Keep,
One sec, Julian. But before I go, can I say one more thing?
of course, yeah.
I want to say one more thing. I look. I tell you what. I'm in therapy now for the first time in my life. I think that therapy is important. We begin to uncover layers on ourselves. You asked me about high school, right? I
Mhm.
had this in my pursuit. I had this coach. I'm gonna shout him out. His name is Kenneth Sharperson. And at that
I
point in
know
time,
that I know that name. He's prominent in the area, right?
hell if I know.
Yeah. I think
Okay, there we go.
we're Facebook friends. Yeah.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Coach Sharp, I'm 15 years old or so at that point. He is about 26. He was a young coach. But again, at that point, when you're 15, you think that mid 20s is old, right? You think it's ancient. Well, he was also my teacher as well. And Sharp was the most influential. He wasn't the head coach. He was the offensive coordinator. He was the most influential coach that I had. And when I think back about it, I'm like, man, so many people have these stories where they say, man, my coach drove me to be as great as I could be on the football field. And that is why I got to where it is that I was. In Coach Kenneth Sharperson, Julian, I saw a man who did push me on the football field, but I saw a man who looked like me, who had already graduated college, was already an educator, but was going back to school because he had aspirations of being a lawyer one day. He was a husband, he was a father, and those things were important to him as well. But it was truly what it was that he wanted to do professionally beyond coaching football, but being something even greater for himself and for his family. And the fact that he taught us those things as well, and that he poured those things into us also. And so, as a young black kid in the 757, seeing Coach Sharperson, I saw something that I didn't see from hardly any other men in our community. And it was really through him, unbeknownst to me at the time, that told me that I could be more than just a football player. And if Coach Sharperson had not shown me that at that young age, I don't know that I would have ended up becoming the man that I have been today. So I've never said that to him, never said that to him. So shout out Coach Sharp, and thank you for everything that you've done.
It's amazing. We all have people like that. Without those
Yeah,
people, we wonder where we would have ended up.
that's
I
right.
tend to think guys like you, Chad, are going to find a way to make it, and you're going to attract the people that you need to
Yeah,
go
yeah,
to the
yeah.
next level. But we need to appreciate the people that do help us, and I think it's great. Yeah, I am in contact with Sharpest, so it's a small world,
Small world, brother.
and I'm not surprised. But look, Chad, let's do this again during basketball season.
Let's do
Um,
it.
Hopefully the drama calms down and we can focus on the basketball. But I'll let you know when I find out down in Harrisonburg at the Madison Oscar Smith game. But look, I really appreciate you doing this, man. Let's do this more often.
Let's do it, brother. I appreciate you.
Oh, it was great, Chad. It was great. Let's see you soon, man.